Hi, and welcome to Horsepower TV. You know, there's nothing quite like a quick trip down the quarter mile, especially when it puts a smile on your face and a low ET slip in your hand. And if you've been to your local drag strip lately, you know that Novas are the perfect platform for a drag race car, whether you're building a simple bracket racer or even a 6-second pro mod.
And that's why we used this 69 to launch our Project Supernova recently. Now, our goal is to get this thing in the 9s with the help of a GM Performance Parts 572 race motor. We kicked off the project by back-halving the car using an Art Morrison rear clip kit that included a 9-inch housing that we filled with strange engineering guts and axles. Then we added a pair of their coilovers, some Wilwood disc brakes, and a pair of Mickey Thompson slicks on Weld Alumistars.
Now, later on, we're going to make the Nova even more race ready by adding a full roll cage. But first, we're going to get rid of this whole front cap so we can have full access to that front subframe. Now, once we get all that sheet metal out of the way, we're going to bolt up a set of front disc brakes as well.
And what does it take to bring a 9-second Nova to a halt? We're going with another Wilwood setup to work with the ones we already installed out back. Of course, the Nova came from the factory with drum brakes, and these are designed to bolt right up to the stock spindles. The rotors measure 10.5 inches, and the calipers of the kit have 4-piston designs that are filled with polymatrix pads. Oh, by the way, it's a special compound designed to grab those rotors aggressively for safe stops at the finish line. Well, as you know, in racing, weight's critical, so the calipers, the hubs, and the brackets are all made with lightweight billet aluminum. Well, before we get to work on these brakes, let's see how my partner's doing getting that cap off.
What do you mean? I've been waiting on you to quit flapping your yaps so you can give me a hand here. Now, this is definitely a two-man job, so grab a wrench. The first thing that we want to do is get rid of this hood. Then remove the front bumper, drain the coolant, and disconnect the hoses. Unplug the wiring harness at the firewall, along with any wires connected to the engine. Remove the bolts at the top rear of the fender, the door jamb, and at the bottom of the fender behind the wheel opening. Now, the last two bolts holding the whole front end on are the ones holding the core support to the subframe right here. Now, once we get these two bolts out of the way, we can lift the front end right off. All right, are you clear of the firewall yet? There we go. Okay, there we go.
Man, that sure opens up things to work on the brakes. And of course, later, we can run our cage tubes through the firewall and down to the subframe and tie this thing together. But right now, we need to get the Nova up on jack stands and get those drums out of the way. How's that look?
Looking good here. After removing the wheel, pull the brake drum and disconnect the brake line. Next, remove the dust cap, the cotter pin, and spindle nut. Then you can get the hub out of the way. Remove the bolts retaining the backing plate to the spindle, and remove the backing plate and brake as an assembly. Before we bolt anything up to those spindles, we need to do just a little bit of pre-assembly first. Now, check this out. I've already pre-assembled this hub and rotor assembly, and as you can see, it's ready to go. Plus, I've already packed these bearings, added the seal and the wheel studs to this hub. Now we're going to go ahead and bolt the rotor to this adapter plate. But before we do, we need to add just a little bit of thread lock to this bolt here. There we go. And once we get all the bolts tight and torqued down, we'll just safety wire them all together. Once that's done, we can bolt the rotor and adapter assembly to the hub, again using thread lock on the bolts. There we go. And a little bit of safety wire to keep everything secure. The caliper bracket bolts up to the spindle now. Of course, the kit comes with a couple of different length bolts for this top hole in the bracket here. If yours has drum brakes like ours did, you use this short bolt and a thin washer behind that upper mount. But if yours came from the factory with disc brakes, you get the longer bolt and a spacer that goes in its place. Now we just slide everything right in here and bolt it up. Slide the hub and rotor assembly onto the spindle. Install the outer bearing, washer, and nut. After tightening the nut to factory specs, drop in the cotter pin and secure it. Now thread the dust cover into place. Finally, we can bolt the caliper into place. Make sure that the bleeder screws are pointing up. Now you want to check the alignment of the rotor, and to do that you just look through the top of the caliper here. You'll want the caliper pretty much centered over the rotor, and if it's not, well, you can use these shims that are 32 thousandths. They come in the kit and you just put them between the caliper and the bracket to make any adjustments. Once you get everything together, just go ahead and put some thread lock on those bolts, torque them to 30 pounds, and safety wire everything all together.
The original master cylinder doesn't have the fluid capacity to work with our new disc brakes, so we upgraded it to this larger one originally found on a '71 Corvette. Of course, it had disc brakes all the way around. Now, it's not only an economical choice, but one you can find at just about any parts store. Oh, by the way, we're also replacing the stock rubber hoses with stainless braided lines that connect right to the calipers. There you go.
And since this thing doesn't expand like that rubber hose does, we're going to get a rock-solid pedal no matter how hard we jump on those brakes.
There's one more piece of brake hardware to install, this adjustable proportioning valve that allows us to adjust front and rear brake bias, which is very important with big slicks out back and skinny tires up front.
Well, I'm going to be right up front about us needing to take a little bit of a break, but wait till you see what we got when we come back.
Next, we start transforming this pile of tubes into a real roll cage. And with a little welding, some cutting, and some notching, we'll have our main hoop and roofline bar solidly in place. So keep welded to your place. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to the shop and more of our Project Supernova. In case you just joined us, Chuck and I are turning this '69 Nova into a 9-second drag racer. We just upgraded the brakes. Now we're going to increase the safety and show you how to tie the whole chassis together. In fact, when we're done, here's what we'll have: a full roll cage that ties our Nova together at 10 points for complete safety, strength, and stiffness.
And we start with a pile of pipes like this from Art Morrison Enterprises. Now, there's enough stuff here for you to assemble your own 10-point roll cage with only basic hand tools and a MIG or a TIG welder. Now, let me show you what we've got. All this tubing comes pre-bent, so it'll fit up real easy with only minor trimming and cutting. The tubing is 1 5/8 inch diameter with 134 thousandths wall thickness. Now, that means this stuff is going to meet all the safety specs of any sanctioning body. Of course, the kit comes with this main hoop, a brow bar, a couple of roofline bars, and enough extra tubing for all the supports and braces that you'll need. Now check this out. Some of the tubing even comes with fish mouths already cut into them to make it easy to fit them up.
Yeah, and for those that need trimming and notching, we're going to use this tubing notcher we borrowed from Mittler Brothers Machine and Tool Company. Now this is their top-of-the-line machine that handles tubing up to 2 inches in diameter. It features a V-block vise here that holds the tubing securely and can be adjusted for any angle cut using the calibrated degree wheel. Now, they do have more affordable versions of this machine that work with a drill press, or there's always the old blue tip wrench and grinding wheel. Anyway, we'll show you how this thing works a little bit later.
Now, the first thing that we want to do is determine the height and location of our main hoop. Now, typically, it runs right up here next to the B pillar. I've already fabbed up this box that attaches to the rocker panel, and what that's going to do is give us a solid foundation to attach that main hoop to and give us a place that we can measure from. Now, let's see what we got here. Looks like about 37 1/4 inches. And mark your main hoop, then cut it with a chop saw. While Joe holds it in place, we're just going to tack weld it for now.
Next, we can take the roof line or A-pillar bar, position it, and determine its forward mounting point. Now I'll make a mark here on the floor where we can weld in another platform like we did for the main hoop. While we're here, we'll mark a spot on the tube where it's going to tie into the main hoop. After trimming the roof line bar to proper length, we set up the tubing notcher and make our cut. Then position the front mounting plate and weld it in. We tack the roof line bar to the main hoop and to the front mounting plate.
Well, I just welded the brow bar into place, or at least what I could get to it. Now, you probably noticed that I'm using a TIG welder here rather than a MIG welder, and here's why. We want to eliminate a lot of that splatter, which is really important, right up here by the headliner where we could start a fire, and we sure don't want any splatter to get up on the windshield. Now, let me show you a trick so I can weld in the rest of that brow bar. We just cut the tacks loose from our front plate and the main hoop, then move the cage back far enough to finish our welds.
With the basic cage repositioned and tacked back down, we're ready for this rear support bar. Now I've already trimmed and notched it to run from the basic hoop back here to the rear clip just above the shocks. When the car launches, a lot of energy is transferred back here, and we want to make this as rigid as possible to avoid any flex. Well, now I'm tacking in this seat bar here that not only provides rigidity, but also offers a mounting point for our seat and safety harness.
Hey, that pile of pipes that we started with is looking like a real cage now, huh? The next pipe that we're going to add is this rocker bar that goes right here between the main hoops. Then we're going to add a couple of diagonal braces that go from the subframe up here to the main hoop, and a diagonal door brace that goes from the main hoop down here to the front mounting pad. Now, I hate to be tacky, but we're going to take a little bit of a break while we finish tacking the rest of these pipes in.
Just ahead, we'll wind up our tube fabrication and finish up the front struts before we dive into some tin work as today's project Supernova starts to take shape.
Hey, welcome back. Well, we finally got all the pieces of our roll cage here tacked together.
Hey, does that mean our cage is intact? Get it?
Oh, man. Why don't you just pipe down over there? Now, the final piece of this puzzle, though, is probably going to be the toughest. It's the forward strut bar that connects the main hoop here to the forward part of the subframe. And to do that, well, we're going to have to pass some pipe through the firewall.
Every car is different, but with the Nova, we just removed the fuse box and parking brake pedal on the driver's side and heater box over here, so we can pass this tube through and determine our forward mounting location. Hey, you got it?
We're good.
Okay. Now, you want it to be right in front of the control arm, and well, it looks like we're going to have to trim off about 4 inches. The length's pretty good, so we'll just notch the other end, and we'll be in business.
You know, up to this point, we've just tack welded all of our pipes together, and we did that so that if there's a problem, we just cut the pipe out, fix it, and weld it back in. But you know what? This cage is looking pretty doggone good. We're going to go ahead and finish welding it all together.
While Chuck finishes welding up the cage, we can get started on the tin work. We've got to cover this area back here, and as you may recall, we already fabbed up our wheel tubs when we installed the clip. The rest of the pieces are mostly flat and go together pretty easily. Just make sure you have plenty of cardboard to make templates, some metal shears, a drill, and several dozen of these clecos to hold the pieces in place before you pop rivet everything together.
Well, the first template we're going to make is going to cover this area here between the rear subframes, from the base of this kick up here back to the center of this rear strut. Now we're going to measure between the subframes. Looks like we got about 28 inches. Now we're going to add about an inch on each side for the flange. Then we measure from the center of the rear strut down to the base of the kick-up. It looks like about 36.5 inches. Then we add another inch up here for the flange. With a cardboard template cut to size, then lay it over the frame rails and mark the kick-up radius. Now we can just transfer this template to the sheet metal. Oh, and you want to make sure that you have plenty of aluminum to complete the job. And you also want to make sure it's a good commercial quality aluminum so you can easily form and bend it into shape. We're using our brake to make a 90-degree flange, but the edge of your workbench and a soft mallet will get the job done. Then cut V-notches in the flange. This will help the sheet metal conform to the radius. Well, now we can lay the sheet metal over the subframe here and fit it to this radius. Now, this is by far the most difficult piece to create back here. The rest of them are pretty much flat, and hey, even my partner can do them.
Oh, yeah? Well, you know, they say sheet happens when you work with metal. We'll finish our work on the Nova right after the break. Stay with us. We hope you stay riveted to your seats. We'll get all the tin work in when we come back. Then a look at what's hot from the high-performance aftermarket. Stay tuned. Yeah, that's pretty good. Hi, welcome back to Horsepower TV as we wind up our tin work on Project Supernova. During the break, we finished that center section covering our rear clip and reinstalled the wheel tubs. Now, I've been making some more cardboard templates for the flat pieces. When we lay these out, we want to make sure that we make the best use of our aluminum. Now we can start tracing. Let's see what we got here. Hey, that's a pretty good fit if I say so myself. A real work of art, huh?
Not too bad for a guy that doesn't know sheet metal from Shinola. Oh. Now, you've probably noticed that we've drilled some holes and we're using Clecos here to hold everything in place until we can pop rivet it all together later on. Now, here's a little tip for you. You definitely don't want burnout smoke getting inside the car, so it's always a good idea, once you get everything fitted up, to seal all the seams with some body caulk.
No doubt about it. We made our Supernova look a lot more like a race car this time. Oh, in case you're wondering, you don't have to remove any doors to install a roll cage. We did it to make our work a little easier and make it easier for you to watch.
It's not a bad idea anyway, though. Now, you can plan on taking a couple of good weekends to complete this job, and the cage that we got from Morrison, about $300 for the mild steel version like we used, double that for a chrome moly. Now, you also need to add about $150 to your budget for sheet metal and miscellaneous stuff.
Yeah, well, we got some hot stuff for you to check out right now.
Horsepower TV's Hot Parts is brought to you by Jags. One call gets it all, one click gets it quick.
If you're building a classic or contemporary muscle car, here's an easy way to get the parts you need to make it just like new. Year One has a series of catalogs on just about every car imaginable, from Camaros to Chevelles, from Mopars to, well, of course, Mustangs. Now, whether it's a factory fresh restoration part like a door handle or a performance part like an Edelbrock intake, it's all between the pages. Now, a catalog will cost you $750, but you get that back with your first order.
Hey, I ain't blowing hot air when I tell you about this new compressed air pipe system from Patton. Now, check this out. They use corrosion-resistant aluminum pipe for consistently clean air and lightweight, plus these unique couplers that compress this O-ring here for a totally leak-proof seal. Now, here's something else I think is pretty cool. If you want to add another branch, you just drill a hole in the main feed line here, then use this quick connector here to add that new branch. Oh, and they're quick disconnect fittings. Check this out. You twist them one way, that's going to release the air. You twist them the other direction, and the fitting comes right out. Now, This is a total air transfer system with prices that are going to vary according to your own needs.
We could use one of those to air up our new Bridgestone tires. This is their Potenza RE750 with a unidirectional tread pattern engineered to reduce road noise while giving you a sure-footed grip on the road. The rubber compound extends tread life even with aggressive driving, and it features this rim guard that acts like a bumper to protect your wheels against curb damage. Now, they've got these in all popular sizes with rim diameters that range from 16 to 20 inches.
Well, speaking of that, hope you can range your schedule to come and see us next week.
The Prince of Puns, and I'll see you then.